Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Women's Show. And I'll be your host, Trisha Gloria Navaye. I am really, really glad that you're here with me. Today, we take time to talk about mental health awareness and what that means for women and our perspective on, how far we've come or where we are going. But before we even have that conversation, I want to introduce to you the ladies that are privileged to sit with me today and help me, tap into their wisdom and understand the work they do, but also the knowledge that they carry. And on my far end, I have Angela Lawino, who is a psychologist, right? Yeah, a psychologist with Safe Spaces Uganda. And I'm glad that you're here because I've done in previous some work with Safe Spaces. I think I've had a session with Safe Spaces that was really, really monumental in helping me deal with a lot of things. So welcome to the show. It's
Thank you,
really,
Gloria.
really good to
It's
have
such a
you.
pleasure to be here.
And then next to her, we have Rona Anembabaze, who is the director to Kule Foundation, and she's a mental health advocate. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Ladies, 14 million Ugandans are estimated to be dealing with a mental health issue. That's such a big number given our 44 million. So that's a big percentage of our community struggles or is struggling with mental health. When we have a month like May, what really comes to your mind in addressing or in what we are doing to address our mental health issues today? I'll begin with you, Angela.
What comes to my mind? I think what comes to my mind this year, what has come to my mind this year in comparison to last year is I think I've been able to see a lot of people's initiative and a lot of what people are doing when it comes to just creating mental health awareness, which is what the month of May is for. So just this year, I've just been able to see that there are so many people that have come into the space, so many people that are really trying to educate people, support people, and just create room for mental health and just mental health in general, really.
And Rona, what comes to your mind?
Before I get into what comes to my mind, the 14 million statistics was actually before COVID-19, which was actually done by Safe Places and Uganda Counseling Association. So that means there is a chance that the number has actually increased to a higher rate. So
I thought you were going to say decreased.
It has actually, unfortunately, it has increased.
Wow.
So we really, really have a lot to deal with. And like Angela has said, fortunately, there's actually been a lot of people that have come up to create mental health awareness, ourselves inclusive. That's what we majorly do as Tukule Foundation. So we do the school outreaches, we do the university summits. We had actually one on the 10th of May at MOBS, that is Makeri University Business School. So the initiatives are really there. We, for instance, host a Saturday show at 9 a.m. about mental health. So there is really a lot of people that have come up that was not necessarily there before. So a lot of people have become aware of mental health. A lot of people have seen that their families, their friends, their colleagues struggle mentally. So to me, I think we're really doing a great job, and I believe it's going to we're going to keep getting there as we create more awareness. And that's
and I love that you talk about a lot of people coming into the space, because there was a time where the only place you would go to is Butabika, really. And the only challenge with that was that a lot of people then connoted to that as madness. They didn't. We did have a name for mental health. Like Yalaruka, they are mad. So when you have such a dynamic where a lot of service providers are coming into this space, do you think that mental health literacy is also improving as we go?
Rona. Do I think mental health literacy is improving as we go? I think it's improving within a certain group of people. So I think it's improving with the upper class, the middle class, but with the lower class, I don't think so. That's why certain things are still happening, certain conversations are still being had the way that they were had before, when there were not many initiatives when it comes to mental health awareness. So there's a group of people that is being educated, and then there's a group that is being neglected. So people will say, churches are difficult. Then people are not really putting a lot of effort in mental health awareness in church, and yet that is a place that people run to.
Yeah.
Or people are, for example, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and I was just talking about how, people do a lot of mental health awareness in secondary schools. Maybe we also need to start in primary schools, because the earlier the better.
Yeah.
And she said, no. Don't take those things to primary. You're going to pollute the kids, telling them about all those things, and then they'll start, like they have this impression of, if you tell people, and it does happen, by the way, where you people get an awareness of the symptoms of certain mental illnesses, and then they begin to say, I have that one, I have that one.
We had an asthma pandemic.
So that issue is there. But at the same time, it's that, when we go to primary schools, we're not going to start saying, these are the symptoms of depression. Anyone here? No. We'd be able to just tell them, okay, so what encompasses mental health? We'll tell them about their thoughts, their feelings. Who do you talk to when you're feeling that way? But because someone has this perception of what mental health awareness looks like, they're like, no. Don't take those things to primary schools. You're going to spoil them. So that means there are categories of people that are getting aware of this information. And then there are categories that are just being neglected. We're not going to go to the north because we don't know how to explain some of these things in Acholi. So it's like, let's leave it. And that is a disadvantage.
I hear you. And especially because the areas, I would imagine, these conversations should be raw and should be had first, even on communal level, even before we have them on an individual level. Like, for example, the communities that experience, like in Gulu, that experience war, because I'm imagining years later, a lot of their issues begin with the war itself. And so I hear you when you say it's happening to a certain people, but it's now not going into the other areas. But also then that comes to me to question on how then funding is happening in this space. Because I know in a private entity, you might be able to, find the resources if you struggle with other NGOs that are present. But also on a national level, in our budgeting, mental health care gets only 1% of the healthcare budget. So how do we, equalize on making sure that not just one entity is actually receiving this money, but also we bring this service down to, the smaller communities, have mobile health clinics at least, if that's just the bare minimum of starting, especially for areas in Acholi. How do we, advocate better for funding?
For funding, I think mental health is still struggling a lot when it comes to funding. And that is, I think, fundamentally because people still do not actually value it or understand it in the essence that it should be understood. Because at the end of the day, it affects each one of us individually, and so I think for us to gain momentum when it comes to funding, it has to come down to the people who are in those spaces who could actually influence the funding increment, if they actually themselves got to be aware of to what extent mental health actually affects people. Because at the end of the day, mental health does not discriminate. It's not going to be like, because you're rich, I'm not going to come to you, because you're poor. No, it's going to affect each one of us. So I think fundamentally the people that are in those positions will have to understand what mental health means and to what extent it affects us as Ugandans, and then from there we can move ahead.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And maybe also the critical question is, because I think what I've realized is a lot of people just don't know what when we say mental health, what does that really mean? And it's not even just for a particular, but a lot of people don't really know. I was listening to a documentary this morning, and the lady was explaining schizophrenia, but she didn't have the language for it. And so because of that lack of language, this person in society is dismissed. They're othered. They're kept away because they don't have an understanding of what that really is. But then, and that is where you come in, beyond people that take initiative. Are there, planned, programming both on national and private levels where we can have, this conversation, as much as we have a conversation on cancer, as much as we have a conversation on AIDS, and as much as we have this conversation past May, are there initiatives that push to have this conversation happen, like on a constant?
Yes, and I think I'd start with just Ronas, who is sitting here, with what they do with Tukule Foundation. which is just, they're not only doing awareness in schools in the month of May, but they're doing it constantly. And I think I love hearing her say it when every time she's like, we've done awareness in schools and we visited about 58 schools. And I'm like, wow, that's so amazing.
Big.
That is big,
That's
you
big.
know. And even when you listen to what their plans are, it's not, and what their plans are and what they have done, it's not 58 schools in Kampala. It is across, you know, and even with their plans in the future, it's not just, oh, let's go to Kampala, let's go to Jinja, let's go to, it is, let us know, okay, so what schools are there in Uganda? Now let us find out how many are willing to have us. Oh, you're in Karamoja? It's okay, we'll make our way there and come and tell you about mental health. So there are initiatives that are constantly ongoing. There are people who host mental health camps of just having people, professional people come together and provide this service to our community. There are workplaces who host health camps, and in those health camps they invite mental health professionals. So the initiatives are ongoing, but again, it's with a certain group of people. Yeah. So the other group is just othered in that category. Yeah. So it's okay. So when we get an opportunity to do like community outreach, then they will get something. But other than that, not really. Yeah. Because you also realize that to meet the, no, I'm just going to call them the others. to meet the others, sometimes people find it to be an inconvenience. Yeah. So for example, if you are going to the slums to talk about mental health, someone might feel like, well,
not only that, they're literally scared to be there. And then there's also a problem of language. Like you said earlier,
that is my conversation.
Like people, we still do not have the right terms to use when it's not in English. Like you don't know what are you going to say. So unfortunately, I've not really seen people actually ready and willing to, you know,
go there,
you know, timing these words. I think the only person that I've actually seen try is Omuntu Wawansi, Andrew Chamagelo. So he actually goes into these spaces to listen to what is actually hurting the Omuntu Wawansi, what is paining you, like what do you understand by mental health, but still like the language still, it's still a very serious problem. So for a person like me to go there when I even hardly speak Luganda to begin with, then how am I going to actually communicate with the person? So it's still those challenges that are still in the field that we need to address, and we can only address them if we ourselves understand what we're actually dealing with.
So, and then I hear you, because that is where I was struggling with. I've had a person say I have high functioning anxiety. It's such a big word. And you're like, if I was to explain this to a regular, you know, mama somewhere, what would be the language that I would borrow to address such a conversation? Like, look, you're okay, you're functioning, but there is something that you're dealing with that you need to actually address. And I think also that also brings me to the conversation of the strong woman, the narrative of the strong woman, because I think for a very long time, you know, when you speak about the African woman, we've created her, she's bold, she's tenacious, she's firm, she's strong. And so it has created this narrative of women don't break. And so every other time we have a conversation around mental health and women struggling, it's quite hard because there is this ideal woman, this narrative of a strong woman that has been created by society for what women should be. So how do we address that? Because I know there are women who are really, really, really struggling. And one, they don't have language for what's going on. But then also two, society has created this model for strong Black women that they don't know how to, you know, get out of that uniform and seek the help they need. So how do we deal with such, you know, narratives around mental health and, you know, badges women constantly wear in society that make it hard to seek help?
Can I ask Rona to
please go
first?
Yes.
I think it comes down to awareness. So because if you come to me and tell me, Rona, you have a problem, when I do not think I have a problem, of course I'm going to be like, hey, I don't have a problem, I'm going to get defensive. So I think it comes down, we have to take the role as people who are in the field to create the awareness to these people, to be like, yes, you're strong and you are allowed to be strong and you are strong, but there is a point, there is always a breaking point. And if you feel this and this certain way, then seek out help, because there is actually help out there, whereby actually people still don't know that there is help.
Yes.
So that's how we get to bring them, or to tell them about the spaces that they can actually go to first, and safe places. There's several other rehabilitation centers around, but people do not know that they're actually there. But then I'm not going to wake up in the morning and be like, I need to go see a counselor, but I don't know that I'm even depressed to begin with. So us who are in this field, then we have to take up the initiative to still educate the people.
And
So,
I hate the level of, and I really, really hate to use privilege, but there's some conversations that have been tainted in privilege. This is one such. Because for a very long time, the connotation of poverty and mental health was all we ever saw, really. And so I hate that it's now fashionable to go to a therapist or what, even when it's really, really good. But how do we, create intersections in helping, the last mile of people, and especially people that are grappling with poverty, and in understanding how to seek help. And I don't know if help is really, really cheap, because that is where I'm worried with the privilege. Is mental health care affordable?
So I think I'm going to first go back to the other question, then answer this one as well. I think just to add on to what Rona said, I think I'd go back to asking women to ask themselves, what is strength? Because sometimes this definition or this thing that you are calling strength is just what society has told you strength should look like. So the TH has refused, but what strength
should
look like. Yeah. But being able to sit down and ask yourself, okay, so what do I look like as a strong woman? What would that represent to me? What would I want it to look like? It's almost like getting to a place where you individualize some of these terms and not allow society to dictate them for you. Because even you seeking help, that's strength. You admitting that I do have a problem, that's strength.
I need help.
You having to come out and actually say, you know what, as a mother, I am struggling with my children right now. That's strength. Because you know what is likely to come to you after you have said these things, after you have said, you know what, sometimes I wake up and I feel like I just want to pick my children and dump them at their grandparents' home forever. Because you know what is likely to come to you because of what you have said. It is strength that you're able to actually say it out loud. So being able to sit down and ask yourself, so what does being strong actually mean? What does being strong actually look like? Because sometimes that strength would be going against what the narrative is and putting yourself first. Sometimes that is what strength would look like. And I think when it comes to just therapy looking fashionable and it being something that only those with on a certain income status are able to access, I think that is true, but it's also not true. But it's also an unfortunate reality. Because you see, at the end of the day, I went to school. At the end of the day, I have to eat. So that means I have to charge for this service. But, and it ties into the conversation of funding as well, that there are some initiatives that have been funded and they provide this mental health care to people who are aware that if I go to this organization, if I go to this place and I let them know, they are able to set me up with this mental health service provider and they cater for them because they are being funded to do that. And I know an organization that does that for women who have been sexually abused. And that should be the Fern Initiative. And I think many of us know the Fern Initiative. Because they get funding for that. When you have been sexually abused, you're able to go there and say, this is what happened to me and I need mental health care. And then they set you up. They help you. They actually help you with the whole process. They make the appointment for you. All you have to do is show up. Oh, that's all. And so being able to know there are support groups that are free. Yeah, there are places, and the challenge is that if people are not putting it out there that these are things that are being offered, and that's where, like Rona had said, the awareness comes in. If people don't know that these things are taking place, then they can't utilize them. So again, it goes back to the awareness. Again, it goes back to informing people that there are these things that are happening that you can tap into. You don't have to use your money. All you have to do is show up. And that's strength on its own, that you're showing up. Yeah.
But I think, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think also the biggest challenge that we get to face mostly when it comes to mental health is stigma. So like, mental health has been stigmatized for the longest time, in that even if a person is struggling and they know that they're probably actually having a mental challenge or a mental illness, they're scared to actually go seek help or go seek a counselor, because they don't want to be like, how will my friends look at me? How will my family look at me? Because for instance, if you look at, for instance, university students, most universities have counselors. They have that, what is it called, like like literally a facility
faculty
for counseling and everything. But then you find as a counselor, they literally have to find somewhere to hide you for people to, for the students actually be able to come to you. So I think the other challenge we really have to deal with is breaking the stigma that is still attached to mental health, and the misconceptions and myths that are around it. Because most of the times you come to a person telling them, I'm stressed, I feel like I don't want to get out of bed, and the first thing most of the people will go to is, I think someone has bewitched you, and you don't know if you don't want to do this, when you're actually dealing with something that needs to be dealt with. And the other challenge is people still do not realize that mental health, like any other condition, is actually a medical condition that has to be dealt with. So we still have to address all of these challenges as we go on, but I believe we're going to get there eventually.
And then you really, bring in a dynamic that a lot of us are privy to. A lot of the solutions a lot of people are giving to mental health will either be on traditional medicine and maybe exorcism. Like they'll either go to church or they'll go to a traditional healer to get medication. And the very documentary I was watching, this gentleman boldly says, the madness depends on levels. And I really, really quote, he didn't have language for mental health. It's like, the madness depends on levels. If you're bewitched, this is a medicine I give you. If this happened, this is and I was like, wait a minute, this is a documentary, detailing around mental health, and these are the realities. And it's quite laughable, but it's such a shock that poor people, or even Ugandans as a general, have been put in two boxes. Either they'll go to the traditional healer or they'll go to the church to be helped. The unfortunate bit is, the undertone of that is, a lot of them also lose property, lose finances, just trying to get this help. But also it speaks to the mistrust that they have with modern medicine. Is it possible that modern medicine can help? So how do we beyond dealing with stigma and creating awareness, how do we, I don't know, how do we we appreciate the role of traditional medicine in our society, but then also advocate for modern medicine in dealing with mental health care?
Okay, I think before getting there, we'll still come down to okay. I think the underlying thing when it comes to mental health is really awareness, because there is a lot of people, even rich people actually, who can afford to take their kids or afford to get their medicine. You still find, if a child has gotten a mental health challenge, instead of actually them taking them to a rehabilitation center, they'll create like a room and lock them there. You understand? In the villages, you find people literally locked in, like on chains and whatever. I recently, which was very unfortunate for me actually, but there was a pastor who was preaching, and he was actually referring to bipolar or schizophrenia as witchcraft. So you're like, these are people that people actually go to seek advice, to seek counseling. So if such people still have that perception, then how are we going to be helped as a nation or as a people altogether? So I think when it comes to medicine, unless Angela has something to add, but I believe it still comes down to awareness. Like, people have to understand that mental health is actually a medical condition, and some of these
And it's
issues,
treatable.
precisely, it is treatable. So you go to first and self places, they diagnose you, they say maybe you have bipolar or schizophrenia, and they start giving you medication. Yes, talk therapy does help a lot, but there is some mental health issues that have to actually be like you have to get medicine. So still it comes down to awareness.
And thank you for talking about talk therapy and medicine, because I really feel a lot of people have reduced mental health care and services to talk therapy. So imagination that, oh, I have a problem, I'm depressed, I'm going to go talk to my therapist. And they don't realize that it's very possible that you might need both one or the other. So back to the conversation we're having on medicine.
Yeah, so like Ronald said, it all goes back to awareness. But I think it's very important for us to realize that even when we are talking about mental health, we need to know that when it comes to the treatment or the ensuring good mental health and all those things, it all starts in the community. And what are the things that make up the community? The people, your family, the church, your neighbor, things like that. So, of course, awareness comes first of if the people in your community, if the people in the church have been educated on mental health, mental illness, mental health challenges, the ones that, the issues around there that can be handled by maybe a pastor, because those are there. But then the pastor also needs to know at what point do I tell this person, okay, our conversations, you can come, but it's time for you to go to the hospital. But you see, because there's just this whole thing of no, mental health, no. This one we can deal with it here in this office. Let us pray. The Spirit of God is in this office. Let us deal with it from here. But you don't tell that to someone who has cancer. You don't tell them, you've gotten a diagnosis. Okay, so we're going to do. No, you don't. You tell them, okay, so you're going to be going to the hospital. We'll pray. We'll pray for you. We'll pray with you.
But get the help.
But go to the hospital. But that, because people have not been educated, or people just have this assumption of what, like she had said, the witchcraft. So it's like, okay, so for this, we're breaking bondages, we're breaking generational curses and things like that. And you have done it, okay, so 1 week, 1 month, 1 year. For how long are you going to break those generational curses? So it goes down to, if the community is educated, if the community is made aware, then some of these things actually would not reach the level of having to get professional help. Why? Because if let's say, for example, if in your neighborhood, the biggest reason as to why people struggle with their mental health is because of let's say, insecurity. Like, there's just so many robberies, so many attacks on cars and kidnappings, and so people just have a lot of anxiety around the area. But you see, if that is dealt with, then the anxiety levels in the neighborhood go down. So that means people are able to live better with their mental wellness. They don't have anxiety. They don't have a sort of fear, because anxiety will affect your work. It will affect your relationships at home. It will affect. So if that is sorted, then people are able to have a bit of mental wellness with themselves. So it goes back to community, it goes back to education, awareness.
You've really reminded me of before the second lockdown, we had a thief scare in our neighborhood. And for 2 solid weeks before they did the lockdown, I just didn't sleep. I was just that scared. And so I remembered, there've been moments where I didn't sleep, and then you have this chronic headache. And so I went to the doctor, and then for the first time, I was very scared that they were putting me on psychotic medicine. So they put me diazepam, and I was like, hell no. Like I'm not mad. But it's the explanation after that helped me understand. Like, look, you're not sleeping because you're dealing with a situation, and it looks like it's possible that you will come at a point where you're like, oh, I stopped. But if you get some sleep or even get medication for it, perhaps you would actually deal with your anxiety. So when you spoke about anxiety, I remember that episode. I went into the pandemic, and then the first few months you have this high functioning anxiety, and then you look like you're normal, really. You're functioning. I mean, we see you every day, but I hadn't had a whisker of sleep in weeks. And so seeing a doctor was what I needed, and it helped. After that, I think the episodes kept reducing, and then eventually you go back to being who you really are. But the stigma that you speak of and the awareness that we need meet at that point. Because even in my knowledge, I felt like,
so you end up in denial instead. You're like, no, this cannot be for me, which also affects a lot of people. So
let's take a short break and then be back.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back. Don't forget to like, to subscribe, and to click on the notification bell so that you get more of these conversations, but also that you share this conversation with your community, with your family, with your friends, so you have this knowledge and you equip yourself. And we left off speaking about, what our community, how our community actually mirrors our mental health. And so in dealing with mental health, we need to also, help ourselves function in communities that are well managed, or even that seemingly are functional as well. And maybe one of the community where we spend most of our time is work. And the hardest conversation I have had to have with myself is how to leave a toxic workspace. But I think that's something then we need to interrogate on a constant. What entails really toxicity? Because that's a word you really hear a lot. This is a toxic relationship. This is a toxic workplace. But I've also noticed that with the levels of unemployment, there has been an increase in a lot of exploitation in the workforces. And so people really work for the bare minimum. But how do we foster, healthy workspaces, especially to have a healthy workforce, especially because that is where we spend most of our hours and our time.
True. Yeah. Can you give our new person a chance?
I don't want to give Rebecca Jr. right now. I want to dive her into the conversation later. So I'm going to begin with you, and then maybe she'll chip in after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's how can we
foster better workspaces?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think for some of these things, how there are those things in like a workplace where as your employer doesn't seem like they're going to change. Yeah. And that's the case for many people. Your employer does not seem like they're going to change. And I think then it goes down to the employees. What can you do to form community with one another, to support one another in your place of work? Because you see, when you're in a place of work where it just seems a lot of competition, like no one is supporting the other person, it's just like, you know what, for this person, they're going to handle the employer's toxicity. They're going to handle whatever the employer throws at them. They're going to, they're going to just do because For them, it's work, it's get to the top, it's please my boss, it's regardless of what everyone else is going through. But if we as employees are able to just form communities to support one another, I think that is a good place to start. Because it's very rare that you will find an employer who is willing to, okay, so tell me how I am not making this workplace good enough for everyone else. Because for them, it's targets. Whatever we need to do in order to bring in this money, let us do it. So if as employees, we are able to look at one another as we are all here to thrive, to get an income, to, to make things happen for ourselves. So let us work together. Let's support each other. If one person is struggling with a deadline, if one person is struggling with an assignment, are you able to come in and help them if you have an extra space? Or are you the one who will be like, last week I had my free time this week is for sleeping. And then you allow your friend to, your colleague to sort of handle their mess on their own? Or do we take off the time to just find out what's happening in our fellow workmates' lives? Or do I just sit next to you and the moment it hits 5 p.m., I do not know you until tomorrow, 8 a.m., right? But, all I know about you is maybe what I've heard you say on a phone call, or if your child is sick, I will not find out that your child is sick until I hear you on a phone call saying, did you take the child to the hospital? Otherwise, not interested. Are we able to just sort of foster those relationships as employees to kind of form a working bond to support one another? I think for me, that is the major thing, because if everyone just minds their own business at work, then we're not really helping those who might not be confident enough to step up. Because even at a workplace, there are people who will be like, listen, me, I will go and tell the boss. If I do not like it, I will go and tell them. Or it's me, I come from this sort of family or this sort of background, so I'm not going to die at this workplace. If it's not working for me, I'm going. But for other people, it's regardless of what the situation is at work. If I leave, my children won't eat. If I leave, I will be on the street. So if we all just mind our own business, we're not able to support the other people who are not able to, don't have the luxury that other people have to just get employed and live at leisure for their mental health. For some people, it's my mental health takes the back seat. And that's for most people in this country, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're joined with Rebecca Juna, and I think that is where I want to chip you in. So many workplaces today, if we did a mental health check or review or status of their employees' mental health, it would be that a lot of them are actually struggling with productivity. They are they're just not functioning well. And whereas they'll show up, even their productive, when you look at the output of things they're doing, speaks to a lot that is happening within their entities. So how do we foster safer workplaces within our ecosystem in Uganda?
Thank you. One, we need to understand and look at what a toxic environment, narcissistic bosses, people that put you against each other. Because she was talking about, you're not caring about the other person, but you find that they put you against each other so much that even when somebody just should come and say, "Are you okay?" You're like, what are you looking for? What does she want?
What's the motive?
But then also you need to understand that people are afraid to leave these spaces not only because of money but character assassination. That this person is going to look at your weaknesses. For example, there is financial abuse that they withhold, and then the moment you get out there to look for a job, we have that reference. Where have you been? Your CV, and then the other boss calls, the future boss calls to ask, and they're like, that person likes money. Character assassination is that now they've capitalized on the weakness they've created. So because you want to get pay, you are even negotiating for a better pay. You're saying, I don't want to go through what I went through last time. But then there's that character assassination. And then you're like, maybe I'm the one that has a problem when all these people are not employing you, but you don't know that there is somebody that is doing that, and maybe a boss or workmate. In the long run, you find that you're going back and then you experience the worst because now the abuse gets a little bit higher. There is emotional abuse where somebody just tells you you are not a performer. You're worthless. The people that I've met young women and she's just crumbling, that they found you a very confident young girl. They found you very, good. You might have your weaknesses as a person, but there were attributes about you that everybody would like, that made you stand out. They want to make you and craft you into a different kind of a person. You get it? And then when you crumble, then within you there is a new regrowth. And they can't stand that. And then there is physical abuse, where I think you saw one of the ladies that was beaten by a manager because of, is it 20,000 shillings? Yes. Now that's also another form of abuse. That those are environments that we need to look at and what they do to the persona. Because there is that abuse, emotional abuse, that takes a toll on you and people cannot see it. That you just go to your pastor or reverend father and you just burst out and cry. And those people know a lot of things and they're supposed to keep them, not going to a counselor, but now you've gone to a religious leader and say, oh, Mama Kuruga, maybe we witched at home. So let's pray against the spirit of rejection. But it's not a spirit of rejection, it's you're in a toxic environment. Then leaders that also do not see that different people have different abilities. If I'm not good at communication, maybe my neighbor or my coworker is good. So, and they will get work and give it to you that is meant for the other person. And it becomes so toxic, so intolerable. Because you want the pay, but also you don't want the character assassination. You just kind of shut down. And then when you shut down, you're not productive. That's true. And then you want to ask these people, what do you really want from that person? They've tried to be themselves, but you have tried to conform them into certain. These are places that sometimes don't have structures. Because the HR is supposed to say today, what's wrong with checking? True. She has come late today. But remember, you might have it at work, but at home somebody, especially for women, they're facing domestic violence. Or the same. So it's a repeat cycle. And for me, I always tell young women that the earlier you get out, the better. True. That's true. Earlier, you'd rather go back home to your parents' home and endure your parents, but you're not getting a job, than stay in that environment because you'll be unrecognizable. The people that will not see your potential and tap into your good, productivity. So you'd rather keep it, go back home, go back to the drawing board and say, what, this is not what I want for my life. Even if the other party says, I am willing to make it better. Yeah, you can make it better with somebody else, but not. If you have seen it happen, it's a pattern that this leader has, and they've done it over and over again.
You're not Jesus, so you might as
well. Yes, you're not Jesus. You're not his mother. You're not her mother. So get the hell out of that space. Rehabilitate yourself. Go see a counselor. Go ask yourself why you kept him for so long. What can you do better so that when you're getting another job, it is better. And there are those sociopaths that even follow you up to your home. True. Those bosses that do triangulation, send flying monkeys. What is she doing? What is he doing? And you need to know that those people are there, and cut communication with any flying monkey that will come around. They are friends, the kind of environment. If you're working in the bank, then you get out of the banking world.
Make new friends.
And
is it easy though?
Then also,
but easy though. And hear me here, because a lot of the people that would want to leave toxic spaces don't leave because, one, some don't just even have the power to. But then also, like Angela shared before, is that it's either that my mental health will take the back burner so that I put food on the table.
Yeah.
Because the reality of unemployment is in this country is that it would kill you before this bad job does.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that we create middle ground in not really build. I'm really really and I really really don't like resilience conversations because it's almost like the strong woman conversation.
Yeah.
But how do you? I need language for it. How do you survive
The environment.
environments that are that toxic enough for you to show up in every other aspect of life? And I don't necessarily mean, and I love getting out while you can, but get out to what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's a big question for a lot of us today, is that I know people that have left for the good of their mental health. I have a particular friend on my own mind who left a workforce. I was so detrimental to their health. They ended up in hospital. But it was just a mental health, crisis that kept on happening. And she was like, you know what? I've got to put a stop to this and take care of me. The unfortunate bit with that is that when they left for good.
Yeah.
And from where I sat, I knew they were really good for growing, the women's space, for growing community. They really had extreme skills that we would have honed in, but also would have continued to propel them.
Yeah.
So how do we deal with such a reality that sometimes getting out means really, really like burying the skills that you carry from these workforces? But how do we also strike balances in, you see, this is what is happening and this is how you can deal? How do we get that middle ground?
The moment you see the first red flag is when you start to prepare to leave. The moment you see the first red, we as women, we have this, they have been
changed. They've been nice.
Yeah, because we are naturals, we are
They are
patient
good
with the red
bosses
flag.
in some
But the moment you
ways.
see the first red flag, and the men are good at it, they prepare for their exit. You prepare and say, okay, this person, and the second time you're like, this person might not change, or this environment is not good for me. So one, let me start saving my money. If you are in an expensive apartment, lower your cost of living and say, it's going to take me 1 year to get out of here. I am going to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And lay your plan so well, so that when you get out, you also don't face another mental health crisis of unemployment and feeling, you're not enough because you don't have what to do. Start networking as fast as possible in the line of what you want or what you're passionate about. Because you'll find that somebody will put you in a field that is theirs. And say, let's say you are good at women empowerment and they put you in the field of IT and you have no clue
what's going on.
And by the time you come back to the women empowerment world, the world has left you. So ensure that you have some time and, go and do your work that you feel is personal. And when you exit, you already have the strategy. If it's another job, you start, applying. Apply as the very first red flag, you apply. And don't be comfortable. You get it? There is no striking of middle ground, my friend, in toxic places. Don't get comfortable.
I want to get in the psychologists here because I'm struggling. I'm struggling because I have lived experience of working in a toxic environment. And the ideal would be everything that you've suggested. But the reality of it is that you look 3 or 4 years later and you're like, oh my God, I've been trying to live for 4 years and here I am. And you never really know how you managed to go through 4 years of that toxicity. And so that is why I'm telling you, the ideal would be at the first strike but as humans, we're built on hope. Let me bring you in, Rona, there. Because I know you most probably have had people walk into your office and say, my boss is a toxic boss, and yet I can't leave. And yes, I've come to tell you, I've come to have a conversation about it, but it's not necessarily that I'm going to leave. How do they then, not only just go back and thrive, but also navigate such a space?
Number one, I think it's not only bosses who are toxic at some workplaces.
Even families.
Some of the family, even your workmates, your
Yeah.
colleagues
Yeah.
are actually the ones who are making you feel like I need to get out of this place. Like
Yeah.
they're driving me crazy. And then the other issue which I find is actually the biggest issue is someone is actually literally driving you to your breakdown. You feel like you're literally running mad, but you're not actually speaking out. You're not telling anybody, or even actually talking to the person. Because sometimes that really helps. If someone is doing something to you that really irritates you, because have you also realized there is people who actually keep doing something, but they don't realize even how it makes you feel. So if you don't tell them how it makes you feel, how are they going to know? So to me, I believe the number one thing is actually speaking out. Tell that person you're like, you do this, and I'm not comfortable with it, and it's really making me struggle with my work. And you see how they can change it. If they can't change it, then talk to a person who's bigger than them. That is, hopefully, the toxic person is not the boss.
Yes.
Yeah. If it is still like he's the boss, but speak to them. Honestly, some people do not know actually that they're doing something wrong. So if we don't tell them, they're not going to know. So speak to them. If they can't change it, then I completely agree with her. Find an exit plan. Yeah.
Let's talk trauma, because that's something in mental health. Understanding I've had a lot. Trauma triggers, trauma responses, and the myriad of a lot of things. And at the forefront of this conversation, I felt like a lot of us dived into and started naming everything trauma. Oh, I have trauma for this, or I have trauma for that. But what's the understanding of trauma? Because I need to know from a psychologist's point of view, what does that really mean?
Trauma. How would I define trauma? I think if I was to define trauma in layman's terms, I think it would just be a heavy external force that affects you mentally. But it does not have to be that it happened to your mental capacity. It could happen to you physically, but it affects you mentally. So I think that is in layman's terms, how I would define trauma. Like an overwhelming external force that just affects your mental capacity. And that would mean witnessing an accident. Yeah. That would mean sexual abuse. That could mean emotional abuse. That could mean physical, witnessing domestic violence. It could mean so many things, as long as it's a heavy external force that just affects you internally. So in layman's terms, I think those are the words that I would use to define trauma. I'm so sorry, if I can just take us back a little bit.
Please do.
So I would not say that I worked in a toxic environment, but I think I worked in an environment where I was just not happy. And I actually did what she was saying of, you start realizing that I don't want to be here anymore. I'm not fine. And I started putting away money. I started saving. I gave myself a deadline. I said, I'm only going to do the first half of the year. Second half of the year, I'm not going to be here. So in my head, that is what it was. And of course, I had my parents telling me, no, that's not how things work. Do the whole year, or, and I know they were saying do the whole year, but they were trying to say you're going to stay there. If you do the whole year, then you can stay longer. But I had it so firmed up in my mind. I'm doing only the first half of the year. May reached, and 1st May, I put in my resignation letter. And that was it. And when I left, I had this thing set up in place of what do I want to do? Where do I want to work next? What type of work do I want to do? But I told myself that I would give myself 2 months or so in between to just breathe. But you see, I also acknowledge that the only reason I could do that is because there are certain privileges that I had access to. For example, even if I did not save money, I don't pay rent, I don't buy food. If I needed transportation, I could just hitch a ride, or maybe with my mom or someone. So, in fact, if I did not have money for 2 months, I'd be okay. Yeah. If I needed data, I could just get it from my parents' phone. Basically, there are privileges that I had access to. And it's easy to tell someone to just leave,
I hear
you know, to plan, but sometimes it's so hard, you know. It's telling someone, you know, you can get another job, and yet they're looking at a friend of theirs who has been looking for a job for years. So it's like, no, I won't. Even if they could, there's that fear of, no, I won't. So I agree completely with what Rona said. Of sometimes tell them, sometimes people do not know that what they're doing is not right. And at the workplace I left, we had a boss who, he had an interesting character. But I remember that I had to set a boundary from the moment that I noticed that character. And you don't shout at me. I'm a human being. Just talk to me. I will listen and I will do. And so even when he would shout at me, I'd tell him, please do not shout at me. And it was something that I laid down so firmly that in the office, I did not get shouted at. Shouted at me once, and that was the first and the last time. And he did come and apologize and tell me, you know, I'm actually very sorry that I spoke to you the way that I did before. But that only happened because I communicated. And this is guidance that is for level-headed people. You know, there are people you will meet who it's like, oh, so you want to speak? Okay, please just get out. Yeah, so it's level-headed, you know, level-headed people. But being able to open up and speak and share and say, you know, this does not help our working relationship. This does not help the work environment. But I think something else that I think is really important is sometimes it's okay for you to just feel like setting boundaries. You know, people are so afraid of setting boundaries at work, and I don't understand why. I don't touch my work phone from Saturday evening to Monday morning. I will not do the WhatsApp. I will not pick. Nothing. If it's urgent, if you call me like twice, I'll be like, okay, so let me pick. Maybe something is going on. But I don't, because I work Monday to Saturday. When am I supposed to just breathe and enjoy life? Yeah. So that is a boundary that I set for myself. And sometimes people are so afraid. I have a friend who told me, she does law, and many times lawyers are like, you know, you don't have that luxury, you stay in office. But she told me, Angela, I get into office at 8, I sit at my desk until 5, I do my work. I'm not those people who will be on my phone for 3 hours in the day. I'm not those people who will, you know, go and sit at someone else's desk. No, I'll get into office and I will do my work. But that also means that unless otherwise, I am not going to be in office past 5. I am not going to work on the weekend. But she does her work. So setting boundaries also comes with, you don't set boundaries and then not produce. You produce and you have your boundaries. So when you say, I don't work past 5, it's okay, because your bosses can trust that the work that you have to do, you will do it. Yeah. And sorry, lastly, I think it's also important to note that some of these environments that we define as toxic, we're the ones that have made them toxic. You know, you're not doing what you were employed to do. How do you expect your boss to react? Yeah. You are very casual with your work. How do you expect your boss to react? Your office has a certain dress code, but you want to wear the way that you want to do things the way that you want to do them, because for you, that's how you've always done them in life. Yeah. You're in a field and they tell you, you know, long nails, no. Long hair, no. Certain height of clothing, no. But so why are you still doing it? Because you're making the environment toxic for yourself. It's not, we're not telling you to dress a certain way after work. We're just telling you to do certain things, because this is the culture that we have set in our workplace. So sometimes we create the toxic environment for ourselves. So it's also for checking yourself and saying, okay, so maybe here, this is me. This is me really. Here, yeah, here is my boss. Here it's my boss. Here really, it's my boss. And there are cases like that. Yeah.
Does it go back to what we talked about, unworkable work structures that don't work? Because you find that if you have an HR that is working and understands, structures don't work. You find that even the HR is the first person to come and tell you, but my friend,
Mm.
why are you?
You
today
know,
what
our
happened?"
rules and
Mm.
regulations.
And then you're like, but yesterday they chased me out of the house, that man.
Mm.
And she can, or he can be able to say, forgive that person today. It goes back to structures.
I hear
Yeah.
you.
But have you
And
also? I'm sorry.
It's all right. Before you
But, like,
chip in,
have you-
I know for a
Sorry.
fact that I've seen workplaces that have structures and are functional. But then also, I've also seen areas where there are places that have structures, but equally the structures are abused.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I was gonna say, have you also met the people from this generation where I know what I want, I know what I can do, so like everything is, I'm like so like you can't talk to her politely and be like, don't do this, and tomorrow she's actually gonna do it to prove to you that she can do what you actually told her not to do.
And that goes back to the HR, because the structures are working. You have an HR to say, okay, Becky's like this. She does for us this thing, and this is great what she does for us. We cannot let this affect her work. I know a place where this chick would do weed and come here and come, and what they decided, so we have she was an IT personnel, and they're like, okay, you put her in her corner, and she didn't want to interact with people, but she did her work so well, and the HR kept saying, that one. She's a best performer, but she just doesn't comb her hair. So that is the role of the HR, to understand the workers, but also to understand the management. But you find that most of the times the HR wants to just have the side of the company, not the workers.
True. Yeah.
And the moment you understand your workers, it's much easier. Say, if I want Gloria to do A, B, C, D, I am just going to tell her like this and this and this. I'm not going to order her around. I'm going to first find out, is she in a good mood? And then, so
I want to wind this conversation, especially because our producer is really, really looking at you. But what mechanisms, because this conversation, when it comes to work, I know the dynamic you're bringing in is that actually there's a generation that is not going to take a lot of the crazy that millennials do take. Like, and I hear you, because the conversations I've had with the Gen Zs getting into the workforce is that they're doing it to create networks, make friends. Ours was a survival mechanism, really. So there's also that dynamic of their why is extremely different from our why. I mean, they know how to make money online. We've just learned how to make money online. It wasn't our reality for a very long time. So I think also that's a dynamic in work that will definitely interrogate on what it means, because for them, they'll put their mental health first. They'll be like, you know what, deuces, I'm out of this place. Let me go make money elsewhere. We did have that luxury when we first walked into it. When I walked in 9 years, I think I worked for a place for 4 years. I was really, really toxic. And I couldn't leave. Because I'm a millennial, I need to pay bills. And we weren't allowed to speak back, do what. So then you meet people that say like, hey, what did you say? They're like, no, me, I'm out. You're like, no, just come. Come on. But as we conclude, especially we will have that trauma conversation. It's quite long as well. But then what can we do on an individual basis to ground each other, but also to check in with our own mental health, because it's very important. So I think I'll have just a response, a conclusive response on, how do we check in with ourselves? How do we ground ourselves so that we are functional beings within society? I'll begin with you, Angela.
I think the first thing I can say is find a healthy baseline. So whether it's healthy habits, healthy community, healthy support system, things like that, find a healthy baseline. And then once you identify that healthy baseline, and the healthy baseline could be sleep hygiene, from sleep to meals to physical activity. Sometimes we say taking care of your mental health is very expensive, but it actually starts with these things that are free. Taking a walk. Take a walk. Take a walk, eat well, sleep well, have healthy conversations. I think we spend a lot of time having conversations that are very pointless. Have healthy conversations. I'm not saying don't have conversations where you just go and laugh. No, that's okay.
There's just a therapy in gossip.
Yes. No. So yes, but also no. What exactly are you gossiping? What's the content of your gossip? Because if you are gossiping about things where you're just putting down someone and you are trashing someone, that's not okay. But if you just find someone and then you're like, let's bang KBs, and you laugh, that's okay. So it's those things, find a healthy baseline and then live around that baseline. So it's okay, so this week I slept for 6 hours. Okay, that's not my baseline. I usually do about 7 or here, but it's not far off. And what was the reason as to why you moved from your baseline? Then you are like, okay, so good reason, let me come back. But then if it's okay, so now I'm sleeping 10 hours and you can't even explain why, or you're sleeping 3 hours and you can't explain why, something is wrong. So find a healthy baseline and then build your life around that healthy baseline. I think that's what I can say.
Really, it works. A healthy baseline. Rebecca.
Some self-love. Self-love. You know, get out there and do things that you think you love. If it's reading a book, if it's traveling, explore, and then have supportive systems so that you do not just crumble and scream out loud, but have support systems that can cuddle you and tell you it's going to be well, and tell you when you are going down the hill. And lastly, make money. Make money, because even the access to mental health services is very expensive. So go out there, make money, but don't allow it to crumble you. And go home and love your family members if they are not toxic. I tend to spend time with my nieces. They're little, they're so little, and then you look at them and you're like, you know, God is good. These guys don't even worry about anything. And there's a lesson to learn from them. So go out there and do things that you love, and make sure you have a support system.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Berna.
I think for me it is the actual statement itself. Check in with yourself, like genuinely check in with yourself. If you start acting a certain way, for instance, if you're usually a calm person and all of a sudden everything pisses you off, you want to shout at everybody, find that point, like be like, why am I feeling this way? Why am I very angry? Why am I feeling so pissed? Check in with yourself, genuinely check in with yourself. Like what Angela said, if you're not sleeping like you usually do, if something has changed, check in, be like, why? Like find the root cause of that why. So like check in with yourself. I think that is solution.
And check-in would be a myriad of a lot of things. It could be that you prayed and then you realize this time I no longer want to pray. What is going on? So I hope this conversation is a start for other hard conversations that we need to have. We need to have a conversation on contraceptives. That's a hard conversation to have. We need to have a conversation on therapy. It's a very hard conversation to have, especially because I feel like the people need to hold their secrets dear. But also we need to have a conversation on healing as a nation, because that's something we need to have, a conversation on healing. People from the north, people from the east, the people from the central, a lot of us have a lot of things we need to heal with as a nation, but also on an individual basis. We also need to have a conversation. It's possible to be raised in a toxic family. And that's a hard conversation to have. So I hope that this mental health awareness month gives you privilege or space and platform to continue these conversations. Thank you, ladies, for joining me today. That was a very beautiful conversation. The producer will forgive us. From us here at Civic Space TV, we want to thank you for joining us, and we do hope that you tune in for the next one. Bye.